Welcome to Pop Culture Retro, which was recently voted the 15th best podcast by the residents of the Golden Years retirement community in Boca Raton, Florida. Each show, we'll revisit some of your favorite pop culture memories with insider and outsider perspectives. Now, please help me welcome your hosts, Ike Eisenmann and Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Pop Culture Retro. Today, we are thrilled to welcome the managing editor of the popular website Mental Floss and the author of the fantastic new book, The Curious Movie Buff, a miscellany of fantastic films from the past 50 years, Jennifer Wood. Jennifer, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, to start with, Mental Floss is such a fun site. And for those who aren't familiar with it, can you tell us a little bit about what they do and which will lead into your book?
Yes. So Mental Floss is indeed, it's a wide-ranging site in terms of content. It's a movie book that we're going to be talking about. We do history, science, just, pop culture, movies, TV, kind of like you name it. If it's like a little minutia bit of a story or a throwaway line you might read in a book somewhere, like that's the story we want. We want to know more about like this totally random sentence that we read somewhere, and we delve into those kinds of stories a lot of times. So it is.
It's
a lot of fun. It's very hard to come up with a site like ours out there when people ask us like, oh, is it like a this or that? I'm like, it's not really like anything else out there.
Well, that's the thing. You could get lost. I have many days get lost in that rabbit hole there, and just like one more article, one more.
Oh yeah, I mean that's actually how I started working for Mental Floss. Is that I was back even when they had the print magazine. It's like I was a voracious reader of it, loved the site, and at one point I kept thinking I want to pitch them something because like there's such fun, strange ideas on the site that like this is the site that I want to write for. And I pitched something, and that was like almost 10 years ago, I guess, at this point, and started freelancing for them, and then came on as an editor and have been doing that for, I think we're headed into like the 8th year at this point. So wow. I've been there for a while.
Man.
Yeah. Cool. And it never gets boring, never gets old, never gets there's always a million weird ideas out there.
Well, it's just, I mean, I can't imagine how much fun it must be to work on that site, because I have heard of it, but not seen it until this got set up. And then of course I fell in the rabbit hole too, and I keep every morning with my coffee now I'm clicking through everything, so it's really a lot of fun.
It is. We always joke that like we need to have sort of like set up a Twitter or something of like the outtakes of our meetings, because like our editorial meetings, they might start at a very normal place, it's like, oh, the Olympics are coming up, and we start talking about stories, and then like you go from here to like here into a bizarre place you never thought you would get. So we do have a lot of fun.
Well, you definitely answered one of my questions about how long you've been there, but can you tell us a little more about your responsibilities there and your path leading up to Mental Floss? Yes.
So I feel like I've told this story just a couple times recently, and people were always like, that's kind of, strange. So I had, when I was like I've always been a movie person. Before the Curious Movie Buff, we did a TV edition of the book, basically, that was TV shows of the past 20 years. That came out last year. As much as like I consider myself now more of like a TV viewer, probably watch more TV than I do movies at this point, just because TV has become, so much more cinematic in recent years. I was like a VHS kid. I was a kid that grew up with like HBO and like all of the movies that came with that played, 100 times a day, and it's like, yeah, I can quote Midnight Madness to you, like it's, so we but just as a kid, like I, again, it was like through cable and stuff, I discovered movies, but then also I discovered directors. And so like, whereas normal kids my age would be like wanting to see the latest Disney movie, I'd be like trying to get my hands on every Buster Keaton or Charlie Chaplin movie there was. This was like, wow, this is like amazing stuff. My dad got me really into sort of like he was a big like John Wayne Western guy, so I'd watch movies like that. He was war movie guy. So I watched a lot of movies growing up, and a lot of movies that I probably should not have watched. My first movie memory I always talk about is seeing, it was like a repertory like drive-in, and seeing The Shining. And I think my parents thought that we would be asleep by the time like the second movie started, and I was just enthralled. I just sat there, and we're a big horror movie household, especially growing up in that like VHS video store era. That's kind of what you had a lot of. But we would be like, hey mom, could you rent us Last House on the Left, it's called, just like go on in. And the guy there knew that these were for like young children, but he knew he could handle it too. So that's the long version. But I went to, I did not think of really like pursuing any sort of career in like writing or editing or movies or anything like that. It just, that was always the thing I gravitated to, like when I wasn't studying or whatnot. And I had planned, to go straight into like grad school to med school. Like that was my plan. And my senior year of, I wanted to go more into like psychiatry and psychology, but my senior year, I was like, I want to write about movies. And every person I know, my parents are probably like, oh, goodness gracious, but every person I know is just kind of like, all right, yeah, good luck. And I did get into publishing, not movie stuff right away, but I started with a book publisher, and within 2 years, Movie Maker magazine, if you're familiar with them, they had a position available for a managing editor, which I was probably like woefully underqualified for, but had the passion, and I knew that you show me how to do something once, and I'm gonna I'm gonna run with it. So I started working for Movie Maker, and I was there for actually like a decade, maybe a little bit over a decade. So I went from like managing editor to editor-in-chief there. And what was great about that was that for me, Movie Maker was always about the making of movies. It wasn't gossip. It wasn't who's, like we weren't talking about people's dating lives. That's never been of like interest to me. I want to know, like I geek out about cinematography and editing and production design and choices like that are made. So it was a very perfect fit for me to sort of just come in and write about movies or edit, pieces of science, pieces about movies that were not just like, hey, here's, who's Brad Pitt dating? Like it just, that's never held an interest to me. So when I left there, I, kind of wanted to still keep within like the entertainment stuff. And Mental Floss was like originally an attraction because they did have like that quirky factor too.
Oh, that's for sure.
Which for me is like the stuff that I pick up on, just like, I still do some freelance writing for other places. Like I do some work for like Wired and GQ, and I'll do things like I had written like an oral history of the Nightman Cometh episode of It's Always Sunny, you know, and so like those are the kinds of things I did an oral history of Gail.
I read that one.
His like karaoke scene in Breaking Bad, you know. So like these are the kinds of things that in my mind, like I think, gosh, am I the only person that's interested in this? And Mental Floss is like that friend that lets you know, like, no, you're not the only. There are other strange people in the world like you.
I've seen, right.
Yeah, it does. It makes you feel like, okay, I'm not a total weirdo. Like maybe I am, but there are lots of us. So like, you know, score.
Well, I want to move on to The Curious Movie Buff. Like I said to you before we started recording, I love this book. It was such a great book. It's kind of what Mental Floss does in general, which is like compile different movie lists and then get a little information on each film. Some of the best of categories. You have musicals, midnight movies, sports movies, etc., all created to foster conversation. And we'll get into some of the individual discussions in a minute. I have your book up here. That's why it's like. But when did the idea for this come about to go beyond making this a website just article to making this into a full-blown book?
So we work, this is actually the third book in sort of like our Curious series. Mm-hmm. So it's something that we did a bit in the past, kind of before my time. We'd had a few books that came out, like trivia books, board games. We did some other, you know, products like that. We stopped for a while and then were approached, I guess it was about 3 years ago now, to do like after the print magazine had ended, somebody came to us about doing another, just like a special edition of the print magazine, which we did. It was sort of like, it was a thing we did with Barnes and Noble, but it was available sort of everywhere. And we then just started getting a lot of like people, like readers, just kind of like, hey, is it coming back? So we were the ones who were actually, as much as we were talking about doing it, at the same time we were approached by a couple of different publishers, like, hey, you know, we love your brand, like, do you guys have any ideas? And it's just like, don't ever ask a Mental Floss person if you have ideas, especially don't ask us for like one idea, because if you ask us if we have ideas, it's like, you know, you kind of take out like the old school scroll and it's like, well, let me give you, would you like 100 or 1,000? You know, we're full of ideas. So we sort of stumbled upon in terms of, you know, what our brand is, what we sort of dig into, what we like, what we're good at, is this kind of entertainment meets an entertainment, I mean, for the reader, like a story that sort of is entertaining and educational. And so like our goal is always that even if you're reading about a movie that you've watched a million times, you're reading about Jaws or you're reading about The Godfather, you walk away with something new, you know, some new piece of information. Maybe it's a new, just like little bit of trivia, or it's a new way to sort of look at the movie, like, or something that you didn't know before. So the first book we did in this Curious series was The Curious Reader, so a book about books. Then we did the Curious Viewer, which was the TV, and then came the Curious Movie Buff. So I think I'm actually very glad it sort of came third in the series, just because the TV one, you know, you sort of get your bearings, you sort of like way over deliver on word count. And we limited that to the last 20 years. With Curious Movie Buff, like we went in with a much better understanding of like, okay, I can't play around with these like word counts as I can on the website. You know, if we want to publish a 20,000 word article on like Teddy Ruxpin, you know, like, okay, we can do that. Nobody says we can't. I mean, I don't know that they need that necessarily, but you know, so this was for me like not more exciting. It was just sort of like going in with a better handle on doing that. You know, so it just became, okay, we're going to do a movie book, and then, we talked about sort of what it would be. And really my main thing was that it needs to be the past 50 years, whereas with TV, we did 20 years. And that was fine. I would have liked to have gone back, a little further into like that eliminated Cheers, which is one of my very favorite shows of all time. So it's like, you have to, kind of kill your darlings a little bit there. But with this, it's like, we can't do a movie book and not have movies of the 70s in there for me. Like that wasn't, it was kind of a non-starter.
Wait.
But did I feel like I answered your question, or I didn't answer your question? I'm not sure.
Oh no, absolutely.
I over answered your question.
This is like the making of book. It's yeah. I have to gush on it for a second, because Jonathan sent it to me. He sent me the email with the PDF version that I looked at, saw the title, thought, oh, this is interesting. I said, I'll just take a look at it, and then I'll read it over a couple sessions or whatever. I didn't get up from my computer till I had almost poured through the entire book. Then I had to take a little break and come back and finish it. It's just fantastic, and it's so much fun. And I'm a huge consumer of the making of stories. I mean, I eat that stuff alive, and a big thing for me was always the commentary tracks on DVDs when that was a thing. I just absolutely loved hearing the behind the scenes stories. So considering all that, how long did it take you to research all the movies and the categories that were included in the book?
So that is a good question. So a lot of, I mean, if you look to the website, you'll find that, obviously we're going to have a list on The Godfather, so, or Jaws or things like that. So there's kind of, there was some content that already existed on the website, which we then repackaged. So it's not just like, oh, hey, we took what's here and moved it into book form. But there's definitely content that, or that you'll sort of see like similar versions of. Obviously, again, it's going to be much, much longer and more in depth on the website than we could go. And then there are other, maybe it's just like movies that we had not had a chance to write a list on, or something, movies we just felt like needed to be included in this book that were in here. So we didn't have to just start from scratch, fortunately. We had a little bit of like, we had a base that we could sort of, or foundation we could start with. So the whole process of putting it together, gosh, I'm going to say was probably like 6 to 8 months. And that might be a guess on my part. But, so it was, it's not, obviously it's not just me that's doing it, it's our entire team. And you mentioned the DVD commentaries, which is actually one of like our key things that we still go back and listen to, like when we're doing a story, when we're doing a list of facts about a movie, we're not going to Wikipedia, we're not going to go to like IMDb trivia, and just because you will see that, elsewhere, it's not, usually it's like incorrect or not totally correct. So we look for interviews with the filmmakers, and not just the directors, the actors. We look for stuff with like the cinematographers, the production designers. These are the little details, that we are interested in. And it's like, not only am I interested in them, but it's great because we can make our stuff that's that's a little bit different, than what you might see on another website that probably also has a list of 25 facts about Jaws or whatever, so that's always my goal. And if I'm not the person writing it, I will actually ask people to, like, when they're done, look for other lists and make sure that we are not repeating like the same facts that are like in these other lists. And it's sort of like, once you're done, go look at some other stories that are similar and just make sure, like, that we are not basically all like repeating the same facts.
Well, things like this are always so much fun to me. This is like what we do on this show too. We talk about movies, we debate them, but because most of this is subjective and based on taste, even while reading it, I thought either like great choice, or I would have included this, or that movie has no business being on the list. So you're the author, but you also credit others on the staff for helping you put it together. Mm-hmm. So how much of a vote was done in each category? Or was it more like you're making the list and saying, here's what I think, and you're all wrong if you disagree?
I would love to do that, really, but I'm much more democratic than that. So like I also the first stab, that was actually a very getting the feedback on like my first table of contents was a very it's kind of like a look into your soul, into your cinematic soul in a way, because the publisher comes back then with sort of like, wow, there's a lot of horror movies in here, and there's a lot of like, and it's just like, oh yeah, you're right. So I was very conscious in that, number one, I didn't want it just to be movies that I love, even though if it was like a choice between two movies, like, all right, maybe if I've got the power, that maybe I'm choosing mine. One thing we kind of decided right away was like, let's try and limit like if we're like a director, just like to one movie, so that it wasn't like the Curious Martin Scorsese movie book, you know what I mean? Because otherwise that was going to be the book that I would write. Or, we did sneak a couple in there. I know that David Fincher has The Social Network and Zodiac, and Zodiac is definitely one of the movies. And I've said this to other people, I'm like, that's the one like where I'm like, no, this must be in here. Like that to me is it's a very perfect movie. And it's one that, I will watch again and again. But something like the Coen brothers was really hard to pick just one movie, because there are so many that I will watch again and again.
I'm with you on that. Yes.
That
I'm with you on that.
Yeah, I mean, I went with
definitely.
No Country. I went with No Country for Old Men because I feel like it's probably my favorite. But then it's like, then someone says Fargo, and I'm like, yeah, that's kind of my favorite. Or Inside Llewyn Davis, it's like, yeah, that's kind of my favorite. So they're all
it's so difficult, because I totally agree with you about No Country for Old Men. I kind of get this craving to see it, which is such a weird thing to say. I just think, man, I want to be in the mood of that film again, and then I'll revisit it for that. I don't do it so much with Fargo as much as I loved Fargo, but No Country for Old Men just sucks me in. But you mentioned those groups. Paul Thomas Anderson gets quite a few mentions in your book, which I was so pleased to see, because
it could also be the Curious Paul Thomas Anderson movie buff.
Yeah,
I could
because I mean, like when he hits really hard, but when he misses so bad that I don't always necessarily trust when his name's on something. I have to give it some breathing room first. But I was just glad to see it.
Yeah, I still even feel like the movies that I love less of his, that I don't love as much, are still really good movies. I feel like. I mean, I feel like I'm the only person that liked what was Joaquin Phoenix, not The Master. What the name is escaping me. The pulpy. What was it?
I can't remember the name of it either, and I couldn't get through the first 20 minutes of it. I was just like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm missing here, but I'm missing something. So yeah, I don't remember the name of it.
I feel like I need to revisit Punch Drunk Love, because I feel like that's one that didn't hit me so hard when I watched it like the first time. And this is like a conversation that I've had a few times now recently, just talking about the book, but something that I really, it's really enjoyable to me now is that like how our tastes change like over time, and what we've experienced in life, and how, something that maybe you loved, you know, a long time ago. You see it and you're like, oh wow, that was a piece of shit. Am I allowed to swear?
Yeah. Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Or something that you didn't love, you know, and the same goes for TV. And I find that for some reason I decided to binge watch on TV. I decided to binge watch 6 Feet Under, which is one of my favorite TV shows. Still is one of my favorite TV shows, but I was like, oh damn, that is not a binge watch. Like, do not sit through like hours of that show. So that was what was kind of fun about this book, was just to sort of like, it's not necessarily, you know, it's like great movies of the last 50 years, but we really also didn't want to put like these are the best movies of the, you know, these are like the absolute, because you always get the inevitable, you missed this one, you know what I mean? And it's like, oh, I missed thousands of movies, like they're, you know, which I know that you'd already said that like we want to talk about the misses. So I want to hear the misses, because
I'm just to this conversation alone right now, the two of you talking Coen Brothers movies, and you're not giving props to Big Lebowski. That's, you know.
God, wait, I do think I think it's in there, but I think
it is in there.
In the best of like the night. That was like my cheat, was like, okay, we're gonna do like a best of the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and that was like the consolation prize. You know,
that's in my top 10 films of all time, period. For me, I've watched that so many times.
It's a real. Listen, I've got nothing. I have nothing bad to say about the Big Lebowski, but yeah. But it's also a different Coen brother like feel, you know.
Flavor, yes. Well, in each category, just like what we're talking about, you kind of have like one movie that's more prominent than the others, and then get to, you know, the standalone treatment instead of, you know, including them with the rest of the films. Mm-hmm. So like get Back to the Future alone, and then do the list of time travel movies, which, you know, of course, Back to the Future is like probably the preeminent time travel movie. But some of the categories can definitely be debated, like we were just saying, and we'll touch upon some of them. But like in musicals, you had All That Jazz as the featured film. In sports, you had Rocky. So was there a criteria that made one stand out as the highlighted movie? Because when I think of musicals the last 50 years, I did love All That Jazz, but I didn't put it near the top of my list at all. So what is it about that one that made it stand out to you?
It's funny. So what was really great about this book is that our publishing team as well, we have a person on the team who is like a big movie person. And so I love All That Jazz, and I love, like, I'm actually a very big music, like I'm a golden age musical, like Singing in the Rain, one of my favorite movies ever. Like I love like the total old school musicals. So when there are newer ones, I'm usually like a little skeptical, like La La Land, things like that. Like I'm just kind of, you know, I'm always curious as to how people are going to treat them. What was funny is that when I sent over my list, it was like sort of someone saying like my version of Zodiac. It was like, can we get All That Jazz in there? I was like, yes, we can. Like I was thrilled to put it in there. And really, it was just kind of like, I wanted to make sure we have more musicals in there. So it kind of, that was how that one really got chosen, was just like, to kick this book off with All That Jazz. Like I liked that idea a lot. I also think that it's one of my big goals and hopes for the book is that people, especially younger people who are like reading it, you know, you'll see these lists sometimes that are like the best whatever genre, and the movies tend to be like all within like the last 20 years or something like that. And it's like, you know, it's sort of like the bane of my existence sometimes, where I'm like, okay, movies did not begin with like Quentin Tarantino. Like there are movies that exist before that.
It's all recency bias.
Yeah, it's just sort of like, so you know, definitely All That Jazz was like that's a me movie, you know, but at the same time I did want to put just movies in there like that we wanted people to discover, because it's so easy now, like to basically find anything. Like I was saying to someone the other day, I'm like, I think the only movie that is like not easy to find on streaming is Suspiria, the original Suspiria, which gets the full treatment in there, because that again is it's actually my Twitter like background. It's just one of my favorite movies. Like I just think it's so bonkers and beautiful, and everything that Dario Argento is. So yeah, so it was picking like it was kind of a matter of like what would be interesting to people, and some of it was almost like the link to Better Call Saul, because like honestly it was that sort of informed it to a certain degree, was that like people don't know like it's Showtime, like where it came from. So it felt like something that we could relate to people. And also I just want people to watch that, like the finale of all that jazz, like that last scene, which like almost killed Roy Scheider, like doing that, like he was said it was like the hardest thing he'd ever done in his life. But it's like I want everyone to watch Roy Scheider dancing in sequence, basically. That's my goal of the book.
I'm so with you, and I was so excited to see it actually be the first pick, because in so many of these movies, and I know we're going back 50 years, and I'm a tad older. I saw most of them in the theater in their original release, and All That Jazz was one of them, and I just absolutely was blown away by it, and it's a big favorite of mine. Yeah, I'm a terrible stealer of references and lines from movies, and I've been saying it's Showtime, it's Showtime, like ever since the movie came out. So people have no idea what I'm saying.
Well, that's the thing, and that's what I like. For some reason, it just struck me like whenever I'd watch Better Call Saul, I would think, how many people know what is going on? And then you had Vernon Fosse that came on FX. Like maybe like I thought, okay, now we're getting like a little back into Bob Fosse, so like let's get some Fosse in here.
Awesome. Well, I mean, reading the book, there's just so much great information on each film, and I learned a lot of stuff that I didn't know, thinking I knew as much as you guys do about these films. And I don't want to spoil it, because I definitely want people to buy it. You have to. But was there anything that while you were researching that you found out that was just like totally surprising, shocking, or I had absolutely no clue about that?
I don't know if it was when we were researching this, but I feel like when like stuff that I've learned about The Godfather and the making of The Godfather, like I feel like that's one movie. And I did watch The Offer, you know what I mean? And that kind of gave you a little bit more. But I feel like there's always something new to learn about The Godfather for some reason. As much as like how it's probably the most like one of the most written about movies like of all time, and dissected. But the background and the making of it, and like the fact that it actually got made, you know what I mean, is sort of miraculous. The fact that we have the cast that we have in that is miraculous. And one we do a lot of on Mental Floss, especially when there's like a new show on, or a movie that is like historic, or at least like mostly based in history. So something like The Crown or The Offer, when that was on, we do a lot of like, wait, did Frank Sinatra and Mario Puzo really get into like a like have like into a fight, you know what I mean? And like, yeah, they did. So it's just kind of like little things like that. But I feel like that's the one that's coming to mind, just because I did not know that really happened. I knew a lot about like the mob protests of the film, and that like they weren't allowed to use like the term mafia, and that to me is just a movie that it ever got made. Like we should just appreciate that, and accept The Godfather 3 just for the reason that
Yeah, I'm with you on that, because I find it interesting you brought that one up, because of all the DVD commentaries I've ever heard, Coppola's on the Godfather DVD was just like, that was my, like, you know, dump of incredible behind the scenes struggles that man went through to get the film made, and it's just an extraordinary story. So yeah, glad to hear that's the one that interests you the most.
And what was so hard too is like, so because we did that, it was like, okay, so now I can't do Apocalypse Now, you know, like, because I put that in there. And so it was like, okay, well, we'll do something on war movies, you know, and then like we'll put those. So it's like, I keep saying, somebody had asked me like if there's going to be like a second, you know, if we'll do a second edition. I'm like, I would love to, because like what I call the cutting room floor of this book is like,
right,
it's absolutely here. There's so many, especially like I'm definitely you know, you probably noticed like there's definitely like the big popular movies like the Back to the Future, the things that you would expect to see, but my taste in movies tends to be a little bit more obscure sometimes. And you know, I would love to just, those are the kinds of movies I love to like introduce people to. You know, like there's movies where, you know, somebody's like, if they've seen it, you're like in shock. And a good example of that I always use is Owning Mahoney, which was with Philip Seymour Hoffman and Minnie Driver.
I've not seen that.
No.
Wait, you have not seen it, or you have?
Not seen it. We've not seen it. You know, we do a special here on forgotten films that people don't remember, just like what you're talking about. We do that every so often, and I've not seen that one. So
it's like nobody's seen it, and it came out actually. I think it came out the same year as maybe Punch Drunk Love and Love Liza. He had like several movies out, and they all kind of like, Philip Seymour Hoffman had like, who was one of my very favorite actors of all time. It's like he's like the John Cazale to me. Like he, you know, anything he's in, I can't take my eyes off of what he's doing in the scene. Even if he's just sitting in a chair and the action's over here, I'm watching what he's doing. But, that's like one of those movies that we still have like on DVD, because we're always like, here, take this and watch it, because it's probably not, you know, playing anywhere. But stuff like, gosh, yeah, there's so many movies like Exotica, an old Adam McGoyan movie, which totally looks like a porn, and on the cover, it's like, that's probably why nobody's like watching it. It is not. It is like this very, you know, layered, deep, like just amazing, like independent film. So I did have to like, you know, go against sort of my instincts, and really, again, this was like very much a team effort. So I really wanted to make sure that, you know, everybody, and we're a small team, you know, at Mental Floss, and we're a very tight-knit team, and, you know, well, we've kind of all been there for a long time. So you wanted to make sure, you know, that everybody that has the movies they love, like, got that movie in there. And it's, you mentioned before, it's funny, you mentioned Rocky as like our sports movie. I hate Rocky.
no.
Fun fact, I hate Rocky. And
wow.
Or maybe hate's a strong word, but like, I just sort of, I love to make fun of it because my husband loves it. And one of our, you know, my colleagues really loves it. So it's just a movie that I'd like to even like go even harder on how much I hate it. It's kind of as a joke, but it's like, yeah, that's a movie. Just it's not my movie.
Oh, I love it. Okay, Ike's not going to say it. Ike's not going to say it, but I just want to say one thing. Okay, and you had, when you were writing the book, you had no idea that you were ever going to come on a podcast with the star of the film, but there was no mention of Escape to Witch Mountain on your Disney list. So what is up with that?
Hey, we have a scary Disney list actually, and it has Escape to Witch Mountain.
Oh, lovely.
We do. We have a scary Disney movies list. Wait, were you really in Escape to Witch Mountain?
Sorry?
So were you really an Escape to Witch
He's a
Mountain?
star.
Oh yeah, I played Tony. Kim Richards played my sister.
I have not seen that movie in so long, and it's funny because we do have this list of like, I think it was, we did it when Disney Plus launched because they brought like everything back.
Yeah.
And like I said, I was like looking at, I was watching Charlie Chaplin movies when kids were watching Disney movies. So I feel like my Disney movie is like, I feel like I'm woefully like, behind on my Disney movies.
That's so funny because now you say that I was a similar young consumer of movies. Escape to Witch Mountain would not have been a movie I would have gone to see had I not been in it.
I know that I've seen it though. And now I'm actually gonna go watch it when we hang up. Now I'm gonna be like, oh my gosh, I know this guy.
Hey, there you go.
Yeah, now see, if I'd known this, then it would have been the first book. We would have
now in the sequel, right?
Yeah.
Well, I want to get back to the time travel category. Okay, we just did a special on our favorite time travel movies, and I was so happy that you included like Final Countdown as well as Time Crimes on your list. Not enough people know about Time Crimes. It's such a fantastic movie. So a couple of questions. What made you choose that one, and were there any that almost made the list? And a follow-up question, how could we leave off the wonder that is Hot Tub Time Machine? Okay.
I do kind of like Hot Tub Time Machine.
I love that.
I won't lie. I do like it. But yeah, as far as, I think that was one too, where I kind of opened it up, it's like, hey, all right, we're doing these time travel movies. I'm trying to think of like, I don't even remember. I should open it up to see what we have on there, because I feel like my pick was I don't even know what my pick was. I'm trying to think, but I can't remember anything that I feel like we went.
Bill and Ted, I have it here. Bill and Ted,
Oh, yeah.
Final Countdown, Frequency, great movie also.
Oh yeah, that was actually probably
That was a great one. Men in Black 3, Primer, Somewhere in Time, another one we love, Time After Time, Time Cop, Time Crimes, and Trancers.
Yeah. I think that I went with Frequency on that one because that was one of those movies. I've talked about this recently too. We've talked a little bit about like marketing of movies and how some movies are so mismarketed and you have no idea what they're about. And I feel like that was like one of the most egregious examples of just like a movie that they did not market well at all, because it just looked like some cheesy like movie that I would never watch. And then I watched it and I was like, this is a damn good movie. Like more people should be watching this. But yeah, I'm trying to think what else. When I think time travel, I go right to Doctor Who. So I go to TV in my mind. Bill and Ted was probably one that I needed to see in there. Yeah, there are a lot that I feel like in any of these categories, there are probably 100 titles that it was like, okay, I really got to cut this book down from 1 million pages. Sure. Like,
well, so, I mean, have you heard from readers or other people at Mental Floss who have argued with you over your choices?
No, not so much argue. Like I've talked to like, how could you not include this title? And I'm like, oh gosh.
Yes, the not includes. That makes more sense.
It's sort of like if only you knew like like the list of, I mean, I would say my original, because we did 50 years, the original list was like, I mean, 50 years times how it could have numbered in the thousands, to be really honest with you, because I'm a total nerd basically. But so one of the things that I really tried to be conscious of in putting the book together was to, number one, not make it so skewed to my own taste, and to make it like a bit more, general, and I told somebody the other day too that another movie that I don't like, and people always are like, what, is Jurassic Park, a movie that I don't enjoy.
I'm holding back my gasp. But
What?
I'm holding back a gasp.
I love telling people that, because like when it's brought up in meetings at Mental Floss, people like basically give me like stink eye, just because like I'm the movie person, but I'm like, man, whatever. But yeah, so one of the things we did, I wanted to make sure, because I told you that the first big piece of feedback was like way too many horror movies, and the second piece of feedback was way too many 70s movies. And so I really did try to make a very conscious effort to like, okay, each decade is going to get like the same amount of, like the same amount of space. Or the 2010s we probably has a little bit less space, although we did do with like the sidebar, we kind of did more movies there. It was like 40 or 50 movies, from the 2010s, just because we're not as far removed from that. So it felt like we could kind of explore more a bit with like the past movies. But it was looking too to make sure like we had all of like enough genres like represented, that it wasn't all basically wasn't all old men, which especially when you go back in time, it's like that's what you get a lot of, I mean, you don't have to go back in time, frankly, for that. Like, you know what I mean? That's what you get for directors. So it was kind of balancing, I wanted to make sure that like that the filmmakers, but also like the film genres, the decades, like that it was well balanced, and it wasn't all board. Because like if it's like, hey, here, this is your book, write anything you want, it's just like all 70s and 80s movies probably, and it's like just like here's 100 movies, Robert Altman and like Hal Ashby, like I'm big like Alan Pakula, like I'm like the sort of paranoid 70s movies, or like that's my jam. So like anything that kind of falls into like new Hollywood 70s movies, like those were the movies that sort of made me love film in a lot of ways, even though I saw them later in life. They're sort of what made me become very like serious about movies and wanting to know the craft, and not just looking at a movie like, oh, hey, that was entertaining. But I look at like, I'm fascinated by the cinematography, by the editing, by choices people make. There are certain shots in movies where I'm just like, oh, like my heart stops. So, you know what I mean? Like movies have such an emotional impact on me. And again, not just through the acting. It's like I still get like my heart rate sort of goes up when I watch like the Copa scene and Goodfellas. Like I can't not watch that and be like so thrilled that film exists. You know what I mean? And that like filmmakers like Scorsese exist and just do these things. Like I have like a visceral reaction to movies. So gosh, I am such a dork, and that is what is going to be in the comments here. And yes, you're right. Anyone that wants to say something.
we could probably talk about Scorsese films for like a whole hour, maybe more. But speaking of Scorsese, which we'll talk about a genre that he seems to hate. We'll want to talk about the superhero
Marvel. So like,
exactly. Right. So they're everywhere today, and you mentioned some great ones in the book. But I always tell my kids, I'm like the old one. Back in my day, they weren't the event that they are now. And the first big one that my time, like, was probably Superman with Christopher Reeve. And then to me, it was Michael Keaton's Batman that probably, to me, ushered in the new wave.
Yeah,
now,
like the darker kind of
right.
Yeah.
That struck the public consciousness and everything. But with Keaton, it seems that he changed the perception that actors couldn't work in superhero films without being typecast, and that's kind of what happened with Christopher Reeve. So, what are some of your thoughts about how the genre has changed in general?
Yeah, I actually think you make a really good point. And so Christopher Reeve, like that's what we think of. We think of him as Superman, you know, and then he'll do something like Somewhere in Time or whatnot, or my brain is not working. Of course, Remains of the Day. Is that the? I'm trying to think of like the, you know, where he's like he'll do like a period piece or something where, you know, just where he's a fine actor and all of these things. But we think of him as Superman. And so, you know, obviously, I think it's pretty well known that not just having to fight to get Michael Keaton into that role, you know, because he was at that point a comedic actor, but like it's something it's funny that that's continued, because then you have Robert Downey Jr. and Iron Man, you know, and like the fight to get him cast in that. I do think that, you know, it's I like the Marvel movies. There are some that I have not seen. You know, I'm not somebody who's like, oh, I gotta buy my tickets like a month ahead for like, you know, I usually will like wait till the crowds die down, or I might wait till it's on TV, you know, to see it. I like what with the Marvel movies, I thought I absolutely loved Iron Man. So like,
yeah.
I mean, I think Nolan's Dark Knight movies are just like, they're amazing. Like those, especially like The Dark Knight Rises, I feel like is one of those movies that when it's on, like you can't turn it off, especially if you like comes on right at the beginning and it's like the little bank scene. It's like you just can't turn it off. It's one of those movies. I think what's interesting is that, you know, because Burton, you know, and like then Nolan sort of showed that like, hey, these can be real movies. You know, they're not Flash Gordon, as much as I love Flash Gordon, like guilty, love it. You know, but they don't have to be campy as much. And again, like you look at like the old Batman TV show. I love it. I still watch it. Like it's one of my favorite things to turn on really late at night is like old school Adam West Batman. But because of the themes that the comics, you know, like that they deal with, they're not like super campy, you know what I mean? Like they used to be a little bit more like poppy and campy. And so now it's like we can actually take these and, you know, here's the thing. Do I agree with Scorsese sort of calling out like all Marvel movies as like not cinema? No. Oh, did I just go off?
No, you're here.
Oh, okay. I had something else pop up. I don't agree with that, but I do think so like we chose as like the movie to feature. I believe we did Black Panther, which to me was like of all of the movies, again, I loved Iron Man, but I feel like Black Panther like didn't need to be part of like the Marvel Cinematic Universe to be as big a hit as it was. I feel like it was just a really good movie, and it was well directed, and it was all, not that any of the others are not. What I'm finding now, I was very excited for Doctor Strange 2. It does seem like Marvel's trying to go in a little bit of a different direction, and I was excited for it. Well, number one, I definitely like Benedict Cumberbatch, but as anyone that knows me knows, but I was really more like for Sam Raimi, because I liked his, well, especially the first Spider-Man. I thought he did a very good job of sort of bringing back like the camp and the fun, but also it's Sam Raimi, so like I'm going to pretty much, you know, like what he does. So I loved it, like they did that, and they brought in this sort of like, he's not new blood, but new Marvel blood to kind of make a movie. But then I also felt like it didn't fit what Marvel has sort of kind of created now. You know what I mean? So they've created a certain like expectation in what those movies are. And to me, Doctor Strange didn't quite fit within that category. It's like, you're using practical effects, you're doing all the things that I love about Sam Raimi and what Sam Raimi does, but they're also building in so many references to like the previous movies that they don't feel as standalone. Like it doesn't feel like I could just go see this movie and not have seen like every TV show and movie that they've created. Like, so it's too much to me of like a universe at this point. Like I was like, wait, so Scarlet Witch is bad? Like I didn't watch WandaVision, so I didn't, you know what I mean? I didn't know like what the backstory was. And to me, I feel like maybe that's part of like what Scorsese's complaint is, that it's like, it's like an ongoing saga. So you really do, it's like, you better watch all like 30 of these movies and shows, or else you're only going to get like half of what's going on.
Well, you'll definitely enjoy it more if you get all the things right. All the
yeah. I mean, but I definitely like enjoy their movies. I mean, I think that they've created, it's just like a very fun, sort of universe they've created. I just wish it wasn't so tightly interconnected that it was like they were a little bit more standalone.
Well, I do want to discuss also briefly the 80s movies, which is one of my favorite decades for films. I love most of your choices. I'm not sure I would have included others. That's irresistible.
But which ones? Lay them on me. I can take it.
I want to get specific. We've discussed this before. And we've had a guest from there too. I would not have included Heathers as one of the best of the 80s, but which ones left out? My daughters love Heathers too. They adore Heathers. They watched it so many times.
I love it.
And I to them, like always, I didn't like it back then, and you guys are loving it now. And
it's funny though that people like, I didn't even know people were still kind of watching it, although there was going to be the TV show too.
Well, there's also the musical as well. Remember?
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So, but which ones were left out of the 80s ones?
Oh, I
missed the cut.
I have to look at I have to grab my copy of the book here. Hold on. I got to look at my page of 80s. I mean, hold on. I'm looking here for.
I don't know if I would have included Ordinary People as one of the best of the 80s. So,
you know what? It's funny because you know what I think that Ordinary People, obviously, it's very different from Heathers, but I feel like what's coming out there is that I like really depressing movies. I like very dark, depressing movies. Apparently, you've actually figured out my secret.
That's one of these lists that it encourages debate on this.
And that's actually what makes that so much fun to me. Really, is sort of like. Yes, like there are hundreds and hundreds of movies that are left out of that. Oh, here we go. Okay, I got my list here. I'm sorry, I'm looking at it because I don't remember what's in there. Well, right off the bat, I mean, I see Some Kind of Wonderful, which is like the one that I went with for a John Hughes movie. But there's definitely a lot more John Hughes movies that could have been in there. Again, we were trying to again, my tastes tend to run dark and horror-ish. So like Videodrome was 80s, I believe, right? Like
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah, like I feel like I would have scared the hell out of half of like our readers if they were like, what is wrong with this person that wrote this book? Like but so again, I'm trying to keep a nice mix. Like a movie, do I have it in here? No, like one of my favorite 80s movies, like Splash. I don't know, like, to this day, and maybe it's like, I feel like part of it is Eugene Levy and John Candy together, like just kind of their interactions together in that. Do I have Spinal Tap in here, right? I had to have Spinal Tap.
Yes, you do.
Okay, yeah. I was like, don't tell me I like, because I'm looking just at 80s and I feel like that was elsewhere. Gosh, there's so many. I like hearing what you think I left out though too.
Let's see, the 80s ones. Well, again, here's some of the things like I love it. It's all subjective. I love Last Emperor. Not sure I would have included it in my top of the 80s list there. But oh, that's a good question. What I didn't see. This is me being unprepared. I'm going to have to start
Yeah,
looking.
you stumped the host.
As I'm
You
flipping
stumped the
through my-
host.
Yeah,
Yes.
that was my only goal on coming on.
But see, now I'd have to look it up, and Ike and I are gonna have to do a best of '80s list at some point.
Yeah, you're gonna, and then I'm gonna read it and be like, nope.
They commented like,
Yep.
"How can you say that?" Right?
I'm definitely
Well-
wait. When was Escape from Witch Mountain? Was it in the 80s?
70s.
70, it was released in 75.
I was gonna say I definitely left that off the best of the 70s. Just dump one host, kiss one's ass, basically.
There you go. With all the great categories you got in the book, what were some categories you considered but decided not to include?
So the biggest like lack of inclusion in this for me is foreign movies, and
Yeah,
it was kind of like, well, even like documentary, we just sort of do like Grizzly Man and then like a list of documentaries, because that's another thing where I feel like I would have gone like wild with, you know what I mean? Like the book could be like all documentaries. We ultimately decided with foreign films that like possibly that could be its own book, which I would love to see happen, because one of my very, like when people talk about, you know, like favorite movies, one of my very favorite movies is Cinema Paradiso.
Oh,
So
yes.
it's, you know, it's like it sort of started there, but I'm also like I love, you know, like I'm an Italian neorealism like fan. So I like very much studied like old school genres. So like, you know, the Bicycle Thieves and like Vittorio De Sica movies, but then like the French New Wave. So there's just so much you know, like Jean-Luc Godard. I mean, I have like I just Belle de Jour is another one of like my very favorite movies, and my cat, I had a cat that was named after Catherine Deneuve's character in it, and people would always be like, "Where'd that name come from?" And I'm like, "Oh, just a movie about a, you know, housewife who works as a prostitute, you know." And it was just like, okay, you know, I was probably like a teenager when I named my cat that or something. But yeah, so that was probably like the hardest one not to include, but it felt like, and again, documentary, I still feel like it's in there, but like it feels incomplete to me, because that's just like, again, it's its own book to me, and it's a genre that's like very close to my heart. But foreign films too. I was lucky enough to, you know, I grew up just outside of Boston, and we had a really, you know, there were a lot of theaters that did a lot of foreign movies, and I became very interested in them, like again when I was younger. So like I was just kind of like a born and bred movie geek, and not really, I was kind of the weirdo and like the outcast in my house, where it was like, let's go see Indiana Jones again. And I'm like, oh, but there's this new, I mean, I was watching, like making my parents take me to see Woody Allen movies when I was
I grew up on those.
Kid. You know, I was like, no, can we go see Hannah and her sisters? You know, and it was like nobody was. I'm forced them to sit through a few, you know, but so I definitely had like, I was definitely odd in terms of my tastes.
On the same topic, I mean, I heard you in another interview. You and I are very much kindred spirits in one thing. I heard you in another interview talk about your love of British comedies, which I love. I put me down in front of anything, and it doesn't matter what it is. If it's a British comedy, I'm there. So will there be something on that?
Oh my gosh, that's like my dream. Actually, even just British TV even is like that would be my dream, really, to be honest with you. Like I actually the other day, I'm always looking like for like upcoming anniversaries of like things that like, oh, what can I peg something to, you know, so that I can write about, you know, I feel like we included In the Loop, in maybe the political movies, because I probably, that's one, or like the death of Stalin. So yeah, like that's definitely it, but also like British period pieces, British anything is
Yes.
if I was in my oh, I'm not even in my office right now. Yeah, there would be just way too many pretentious, like random British things lying around my office that people are like, are you English? It's like, no, I just wish I just think I am. But yeah, oh gosh, now you just got me like just picturing doing like a whole Monty Python book, and that
I'm just going to say, if you need contributors for the British one, you know where to find, us.
I can't imagine. That's like a dream. That's a dream project, really.
But no, so will there be a sequel for this book?
I do not know. I mean, it's definitely something where when they were cutting out my 2000 movie suggestions, and when we're cutting them down to 100 or whatever, that it was like, we could do these in another book. So if that was either to placate me or just get me out of their hair.
Let's just shut her up right now. Is that what?
Yeah, like basically that's kind of what you need to do with me, is just like get me to shut up. It's not easy either. So I hope so. And if somebody was asking me the other day, like, what would it be? I was like, we could go back in time, another 50 years. We could do another, like this 50. I was like, horror, like, would be just like the curious horror movie, like that would be, there's just so many things that I would totally be down to write and do.
Well, if you do those, we'd love to have you back to discuss them when the time comes, and you're welcome back anytime as it is. But
hey, listen, you just tell me the topic and I'm here. This is fun. I love when I get to spend an hour of my day just talking with fellow movie geeks. It doesn't feel like work, so it's nice.
Well, again, we appreciate you so much for taking the time to come on today. And again, please go out and buy. This was such a great book. We spent time, and as you see, it's fun to debate the topics as well. The book is The Curious Movie Buff, a miscellany of fantastic films from the past 50 years. And again, thank you, Jennifer, for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. And I look forward to coming back and debating whatever your choices are when you get that 80s list together.
Yes, absolutely.
By the way, I should say Mac and Me, I probably should have included that.
Well, you have to, just from Paul Rudd. But again, this has been Pop Culture Retro. I'm Jonathan Rosen with Ike Eisenmann. And again, a special thanks to Jennifer Wood. And please subscribe.
Thank you for listening to Pop Culture Retro, where no one was hurt during the making of this podcast.